Today's video is sponsored by Uppercase Designs.
What's up YouTube, and welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today we're going to create this desert cactus design. Now, as always, there's links to everything that you're going to need in the description down below. Check out the requirements section. There'll be a link to where you can grab the completely free requirements, the palette and the canvas size, and anything else that you may or may not need for today's design. Apologies throughout the whole of this tutorial if I sound a little bit nasally. I'm not very well at the time of recording, but we march on regardless. As always, when you're done, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram. Come and share them with the Discord community as well. It's completely free to join. And if you want to get access to the best Procreate catalog of tutorials, well, they're all available over on my Patreon. I've been creating 3 exclusive tutorials every single month for my Patreon supporters, and the catalog is over 100 now. You can get access to every single one when you join, and there's a link to that again in the description down below, and you can support the work that I do here. So enjoy today's design, have fun with it. And with all that said, let's get started.
But before we do, I want to introduce you to the Nimble Grip 2. Not only does this grip provide 2 varying swooped edges for comfort when writing or drawing, but this new version has also been engineered around the Apple Pencil's native features. It now boasts a new design that includes a flat edge, which allows you to use the Apple Pencil's native features such as the double tap feature where you can double tap to switch between an app's tools, for example. And my favorite part, you can now charge the Apple Pencil without having to take off the grip. How awesome is that? Now, if you want to check out the Nimble Grip 2 for yourself, I'll leave a link to it in the description down below where you can find all the different colors that it comes in. And with that said, let's get back to the video.
So what we're going to go ahead and do is once you've created your canvas, let's go up to our actions. So we're going to go ahead and go to the canvas tab. We're going to turn on a drawing guide and we're going to edit that drawing guide to, again, 1/4 of your canvas size. So for me, it's 500. If you hit done, you'll get this 4x4 grid, and then you can use that to lay out your design against mine on the screen. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is block in some basic shapes. So let's go up to our layers. We've got an empty one here. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here. It is the top of the 3rd column from the right. We're going to go to our brush and we're going to use the trusty old calligraphy option of the monoline brush. And if you need to, tap on your monoline and just make sure your stabilization is up to something that you're happy with. So something like streamline maxed out and stream stabilization around about the middle point is pretty good. And then all we're going to do is draw in our very first sort of background element. So it's going to sort of swoop in from here. It's going to dip down to around about sort of the midpoint here. You can put little dots if you want. And then it's just going to allow yourself just to run up to around about sort of this area over here on the edge of the canvas. So you can just go ahead and all you want to do is just kind of swoop in from here, come down a little bit, and then just come up. You can add in a little bit of unevenness to it. It's perfectly fine. And drag and drop your color into the bottom half of the design. If we then go ahead and go to our layers and create a new layer and drag it underneath, we'll work on the background and make our way forward. So with this empty layer underneath our little hillside there, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here, the bottom of the 2nd column. We'll drag it onto the screen. We're then going to go ahead and go to our layers, create another new layer. We'll go to our colors again and we'll go ahead and grab this color here, the bottom of the far right column. We'll go to our brush. We're going to go to airbrushing and the soft brush. Let's set that size to something fairly controllable though, around about sort of 30%. And we're going to go round in a circle in this bottom right area and start to sort of rotate it round, making sure down here in the sort of bottom right area is, and I say bottom right, it's just down here, is a little bit sort of more colourful in comparison to the sort of darker top left corner that we want to sort of blow out a little bit. And I'm putting it on separate layers so we can adjust it afterwards. We're then going to go ahead and go to our layers, create another new layer. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the color here, the middle of the far right column. We'll go ahead then and do exactly the same thing. We'll start in this bottom right corner. We'll just blend this one out, blending it over. So you should end up with a sort of blend between the 3 colors that we've introduced so far. But again, this bottom right area over here, we want to make sure it's nice and bright. So down here, nice and bright. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our layers, create another new layer. Go to our colors and grab the top right color in the palette. And then this one wants to sort of sit just sort of around sort of the horizon. So just in behind and a little bit off to the right hand side over here. And just kind of pushing that along a little bit over towards the left hand side. But more so just a rounded kind of circle and cluster of color just in this area here. You should end up with a bit of a gradient like this. And of course you can tweak your layers if you need to. If you're concerned about your layer count, pinch them together and put it all onto one layer. You don't necessarily now need to have them separated. Just make sure you're happy with it. And we can move on. So we'll go ahead and we'll also go ahead and create our sort of additional layers of color, which are going to sit in front of our hillside. So I'm going to go ahead and swipe from left to right on all of those and just rename that group and just call it sky. just so I can keep my layers and keep them nice and organized. And then in front of our hills here, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this color here, the bottom here of the fourth column from the right. We're going to make our brush a little bit larger again, around about sort of 35 to 40%. And we're going to go ahead and go back to our layer, change the blend mode of it from normal to the option of add. I'm going to go ahead and bring that down to 70% just straight off the bat, just so we can sort of have it a little bit more reduced. But in this area here, we're going to go ahead and go around in a circle and look at how that color just really expands and gets super, super warm. You can push it across down here a little bit, but ultimately you just want to kind of just give a little bit of a glow here to the hillside. And you should get this kind of like glowing effect almost from the outside of your pen stroke there. And then what we'll also go ahead and do is we'll go to our layers and create another new layer. We'll change the blend mode again from normal to the option of add. And we're going to leave it as it is. The only thing we're going to do is reduce our brush size right down to around about sort of a 5%. Let's take a look at the size for that. That looks pretty good for size. We're going to go up onto this line and roughly a little bit off more to the right hand side than I've got initially. And we're just going to plant in a sun here by just tapping a few times with the soft airbrush, and you get this beautiful glow. Now, of course, you may want to go down then to the layer we just created before, grab your brush and just maybe move it a little bit higher again, just to try and match into that space over there on the right hand side. So that is the glowiest area. But you may need to go ahead and reduce the opacity a little bit further potentially if it's too bright. So you could drop it down to 60% if you want to add some further adjustment over there. So I'm happy with how that looks for a minute. Let's then go ahead and work on our hillside here. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of it and swipe from left to right and group them together, and we'll rename it and call it hills. In the hills group, we're going to go ahead and tap on the empty layer above, and we're going to tap on it and clipping mask it to the actual hills themselves. We're then going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here, the middle of the far left column, and we're going to go ahead and go horizontal. So we're going to set our brush size to around about sort of 20, let's go 20%, horizontal left to right, and just about going over that top bottom row here of our grid. So you can see the grid on the screen there, making sure the bottom is nice and colorful, and then as you get close to that, just kind of blending it out a little bit, leaving the top of the hills a little bit darker with a little bit of color. And then you can, on the same layer, go to this color here, the top left of the palette, a little bit of a darker tone, and then just a little bit closer towards us, just introduce this slightly darker tone just right down in front of us. That's all, just a little bit of a tiny change in the gradient right at the very bottom here. And we're also going to go ahead and we will create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. We're going to go to our colors again and grab that same sun color, the bottom of the fourth column from the right. And let's make our brush size nice and large, around about sort of 40% nearly, 35 to 40% again. What I want you to do is just in the middle here, just go round in a circle just a few times, really, really lightly, just again to add in some additional glow of color onto those hills in the background. Now, the hills themselves are too sharp right now. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go down to the layer for the actual hill itself. We're going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of Gaussian blur, and we'll go swipe from left to right. And we can blur that hill out, giving a nice fuzzy line to it as well, but also giving ourselves a lot of distance. Now, if we go to something around about 5 to around about 8%, you'll get just a very sort of faint, almost orange line down the edge there. So I'm going to go to around about 6% there, and I'm going to tap on my adjustments when I'm done. And now your hills should be nice and blurry. Now let's go ahead and just add in some ground texture to this area here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into our layers. We're going to go above our sun and this glow here. So we're going to create a new layer above it. We can just call this floor. And on this layer, we're going to go ahead and create a temporary new layer. So we're going to create a new one and drag it underneath the floor. We'll go to our colors and we'll just double tap in the top left to select white. I'm going to drag that onto the screen and fill the whole layer so we can't see the rest of our design for a moment. We're then going to go back to the floor layer that we created. We're going to go to our colors and grab the color in the bottom left of the palette. And we're going to go to our brush. We're going to go into calligraphy and we're going to use the shale brush here. And the size, I've got it set to 5%. You may want to go ahead and change that depending on how much pressure you use. I'm going to end up pressing fairly hard on the screen here just to try and get a good solid amount of texture. Now what we want to try and do here is we want to create the cracks in the ground. So you want to kind of start off with just random formations potentially, all the little random cracks in the dry earth, and you can create all of these little patterns, and it's just fairly straightforward. There's nothing sort of really required for this, to be honest with you. Just try not to cluster them up too much, and you just need to make sure that you start to think about filling out the entirety of the screen. So don't try and overthink it. This one's fairly straightforward, and we're just going to again continue until we fill up the entirety of the screen. Just keeping more of these shapes in play, and it may take a minute or two, so just take your time. But again, try not to overthink it. Some of those lines there, for example, they are ever so slightly sort of overlapping one another, and that's fine. Have some sort of shapes here, sort of be isolated like this, and then sort of draw around them. You can run your lines into corners. That's perfectly fine on this occasion. Typically, that's a rule that you try to abide by, that you don't run lines into other corners. But on this occasion, with this particular type of effect that we're creating here, it's perfectly fine. Some of them, you can see I'm going a little bit more boxy to them. Some of them are a little bit more rounded, but to be honest, I'm not really thinking about it too much. We just want to fill up that entirety of the screen with this pattern, and it's going to be our groundwork. Now, what you could do is just before you get to that halfway point, you could then go ahead and go to the layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor and then flip it vertically. Drag the extra version up towards the top. You could even flip it horizontally as well, so it just doesn't sort of match up too closely. And then using that, you can then tap on your cursor when you're done. You can go to the layers and pinch the two floor layers together. And then you can go ahead and save yourself some time and just link these together in the middle. And it might not be too obvious to people looking at it that it is actually a bit of a reflection, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to lose a little bit of this layer anyway. So if you get a little bit of reflection, that's perfectly fine, but you can ultimately also just potentially break down some of these shapes if you wish, randomly drop in an additional line here and there, which may cause the eye just to not really pick it up too much that it is a reflection. Certain elements may look fairly reflected, but other ones may not. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw in a couple more, and I think we'll leave it like that. So once you've drawn in your floor, what you then need to go ahead and do is go back to your layers. We can get rid of the white layer, so we can swipe it to the left and delete it. And then you'll end up with your floor layer here. Now what we want to go ahead and do is we want to just distort this to match up to the ground surface. So we're going to grab our cursor, we're going to zoom out of our canvas a little bit. I've gone to the option of distort, and we're going to go ahead and grab the top middle node, and we're going to bring that straight down, and we're going to try and cover up the majority of the land. But at the minute, you don't get the sort of perspective that those ones in the distance are a bit further away. So we're going to zoom out. We're going to drag the bottom right node out to the right, bottom left node out to the left. And as long as your middle node here sits on your grid in the middle, you should have then nicely laid out your perspective. So you can go a little bit wider, which gives you even more of the larger shapes closer towards us. And again, gives you that nice perspective. Now I've made mine a little bit sort of shorter than it needs to be. We want to make this a little bit taller, so just slightly over the top of that bottom row there, and then tap on your cursor when you're done. So you should have a good amount of perspective to it though at this point. What we then want to go ahead and do is go to the layer and swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We're going to go to the top one and go to our adjustments and gauge and blur. I'm going to swipe from left to right and just blur this out. So we're going to give it like a bit of a shadow here. So I've gone up to about sort of 5. You could probably go up to anywhere from 5 to 8. Then tap on your adjustments when you're done. We're then going to go ahead and we'll pinch those two together. Let's then go ahead and go up to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of gauge and blur, but we are going to go ahead and tap on this arrow at the top here, because if we swipe from left to right now, we blur the whole layer. We don't want to do that. We want to go to this arrow here, change it to the option of the pencil, so now we're in control. You can use your finger to go left and right to change the gauge and blur. I'm going to go to 50%. And then what we have to do is just go up to our brush. We go to the option of airbrushing, and we'll use the soft brush. And then let's set the brush size to something a bit smaller than that, maybe around about sort of, let's go to about sort of 15% there. And what you want to do is you want to press really lightly, if you can, just down here at the very bottom, just go left to right a few times and blend out a bit of a blur. So right in front of us, it's nice and blurred, but you want to leave this area here where our cactus is going to be. Likewise, in the distance, you can go left to right on the ones in the distance, start to blur them out a tiny bit, blur them out, making sure that they just sort of disappear, and kind of round it off a little bit as well at the sides. You can round it off just a tiny bit, leaving your pattern in the middle a bit more sort of exposed and a little bit more in focus. So once you've got something like this, you can tap on your adjustments when you're done. And then we are going to go ahead and mask this out in a moment. In fact, we'll do it now. We'll tap on the layer, we'll add the mask. We'll go to the mask and we'll change the color to black. And our brush should be the soft brush under airbrushing still. We're going to go ahead and set our brush size again to 20%. And just in the distance, we're going to start to just mask this out. So it just sort of disappears. We want to make sure that that looks like it's further away. So if we take this down just a little bit, just up towards this bottom row line here, you can see on my grid, we'll blur out the corners there, sort of fading them out. Again, leaving this area here in the middle of our design as the sort of cracked ground that we can see. Now you can then go up to the layer, you can tap on the actual layer itself and bring that down to around about sort of 70% there. And that will just take away a little bit of the harshness of it as well. So the next step is to create our cactus. So we're going to go ahead and get started on that. We'll go ahead and create a new layer. We'll go ahead and then create another one and swipe from left to right and group them together. We'll just rename this and call it Cactus. And then in this group, we're going to go ahead and go to the top layer out of the two. We're going to go to our colors and make sure, again, it's the one in the very bottom left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to calligraphy again and the monoline brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off by just drawing in a sort of guideline. And that's going to roughly sit in the middle of this second column. And I want to sort of identify the height top to bottom. So we're going to draw that down. I'll put my finger on the screen just to make sure it's nice and straight. And all it needs to do is run down to around about sort of this point here. Then with this line in play, we can then go ahead and create our cactus shape. So you can go ahead and sort of widen that up, bringing it down. And then maybe as it gets closer towards the bottom, it starts to sort of join in a tiny bit more. And then at the top here, we'll go ahead and we'll go again. Don't worry if your lines aren't perfectly smooth either. It's perfectly fine, of course. It's a natural kind of thing. It's a piece of nature as well, isn't it? So it's not going to be perfect. And then you can drag and drop your color into both halves there. And you've got sort of the main body. Now, if you don't like it too much, you can always go up to your cursor and the warp option. And you can just sort of move this around a tiny bit, you know, squeeze it in, maybe sort of try to adjust it in a way that gives you a bit of a kind of rounded effect at the top that you like the look of. Everybody's going to vary, so don't try and stress too much over it. Create a cactus that's unique to your design. So once we've got that one in, we're going to go to our layer underneath it in this group that we created. And we're going to go ahead and draw in sort of the arms, essentially, of the cactus. So one's going to sort of go to here, and it's going to link into the body around about here. So going from those 2 points, you can go ahead and sort of round off a little bit of a shape here, and then maybe let that round back in on itself a tiny bit. Round it off and then kind of just let that kind of thin, and then make sure you create a loop so you sort of connect these two together so you can drag and drop your color into that space. We'll then move over to this right side and we'll just do it a tiny bit higher. So I'll put a little dot there as a guide. We're going to let that run up to around about here. We want it to be somewhat unique. So we're going to go ahead and just sort of swoop this in like so, giving it a few sort of random little wobbles in there. Nothing too crazy though, but just nice and natural. And then kind of swoop that in at the bottom, connecting that together, and again drag and drop the color in. You may want to just make some refinements like I'm going to quickly do just on that top edge, but other than that, that looks pretty good. What we'll also go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and create a new layer in front of our cactus group, and then we're going to go ahead and draw in the ground, which is going to sit just of course underneath it. So if we bring our brush size down to say something like a 5% brush size here, ignoring sort of the base of our cactus itself, we want to sort of move this over towards this left hand side. We're going to go to just about sort of halfway here, and around about here we're going to go ahead and just sort of mound up the earth around the base of our cactus. I'm going to move that across, and it's going to come down, and it's going to just make its way to a similar sort of height in our design, a little bit over towards that right hand side, and then you can go ahead and just link these together and maybe extend that one slightly and drag and drop the color in. So now you've got a little bit of a mound of earth there at the very bottom. So we've got kind of the basic foundations now of everything that we need in order to obviously draw in our cactus. Now we're going to go ahead and just triple check that we're happy with our layers and make any adjustments that we need to. Now I've just gone ahead and quickly made some adjustments to mine, only minor things. I just brought these ones in a tiny bit, but we now have all the foundations for our cactus, so we can now start to go ahead and start to detail it. So we're going to go ahead and go to the main layer here, the main part of the cactus. We're going to go ahead and go to our brush, and we're going to go ahead and change our brush to the option of calligraphy and the script brush. I've got the brush size set to 4%, and what we're going to do is we're going to rough up the edges a little bit to start with. So the first thing we'll do is literally just wiggle our pen along the edge of our cactus, just giving it a little bit of unevenness and a little bit of sort of wobbles and just that natural kind of look to it rather than the monoline brush. So this just is something that's better to do afterwards. You want to sort of lay down the foundation of your shape a little bit, and then from there we can go ahead and just make some adjustments. So I'm just wiggling the pen all the way up and down. And of course, you guessed it, we'll end up having to do this on the arms as well. So once you've got a nice little sort of uneven edge to it, go back to your layers and go down to the two arms of it. We're going to zoom in and do exactly the same. We're just going to wobble our pen all the way up and down the edges. Nothing too drastic. In certain places, I've just sort of kept it quite smooth, but in the majority of it, you can just add in a little wobble here and there that just gives it a little bit of a more natural look to it, a little bit uneven. Lovely stuff. And then let's go ahead and do exactly the same. And potentially you may have already done this in the first step, but we're going to do this now very, very quickly. Awesome. So let's go ahead then, and we're going to go and add in all the little sort of spikes that are going to run off the edge. So what I think the best thing to do is, we're on the arms on this layer already, so let's go ahead and work in there now. I'm just going to go ahead and just flick my pen all the way up and down this edge here. So just creating little gaps here and there and little variations in the weight of the brush if possible. And then if you kind of rotate it in the opposite angle and then kind of repeat the same thing, you can just let this run down the edge here, creating all of the little sort of spikes that we want all the way down our side of our cactus. And then just repeat that all the way around. So you might not need to do that rotation. I find it particularly easy if I just keep the angle of the canvas, make the canvas angle a little bit different, then I can just make sure the angle of my lines are the same, and I'm just repeating the same motion here and there. Now, don't be afraid to also sort of run out the odd little random line that's a little bit maybe thinner or even longer, you know, just to create some nice variety in here. So you can just really sort of change up the edge here of your canvas or your edge of your cactus. And we'll just keep going all the way down. And again, I'm going to rotate it then in the opposite angle, so I can just go ahead and start to flick the adjacent sort of spikes out that are just going to run all the way up. So I've made mine particularly spiky, and I quite like that. It looks quite cool. It's going to give it some nice character. And again, the odd little random one that runs astray is perfectly fine. You kind of want to give it a bit of a taper though on the end. So if you can sort of manage that you create a spike of sort, but you just give it a good taper, meaning it gets thinner on the end, it will look perfect. Let's go ahead and just repeat that then over here too. And again, you don't have to make them both exactly the same, and you don't have to add in an absolute boatload of the spikes either. You can just leave a gap here and there. It's just maybe where the angle of the cactus is that it's not sort of pointing towards us in a way that we can see any of the spikes. So you can just make it a little bit different. And then I'm going to rotate my canvas round again, just so it's a bit easier for me. Makes a lot more sense with the movement of my hand. I'll go up and down this edge. Again, I'm going to try and keep this one a little bit thinner in terms of its density compared to the opposite side, just so we've got some nice sort of variation between the two. So we've got that done. We can then go ahead and repeat that for the main shape. So we'll go up to our layers, we'll go up to the next one, and we'll carry on in the same fashion. Now, with this one being a little bit larger, I think you can also particularly get away with adding in some slightly larger lines occasionally here and there, especially if you've got a nice sort of light background area such as here. It will be really nice and sort of stand out because it's got a good solid amount of contrast to it. So don't be afraid to do that, but also sort of vary it up. Don't go too mad with it, but vary it up with the small spikes in the gaps. And of course at the top here, you can sort of crisscross them a tiny bit. Of course, I'm going to rotate my canvas in a minute and go back down that side. For the minute now, I'm just shooting down this side here. Spikes all over. Couple sort of getting a little bit more thinned out on that side, and maybe I'll go ahead and add in some more in a moment, but let's go ahead and rotate that then in a way that I can go back down the opposite side, crisscrossing them across each other. Lovely stuff. And then that large one, I'll just give a nice cross across it. Down the bottom, just a few. And then this side over here, I need to go ahead and make sure I add some down here too. Just a few. We'll keep that nice and simple. Again, you don't have to sort of keep the level of consistency the exact same all the way around. If anything, if you have the variety, it makes it look more realistic. And again, a couple more that maybe just run a tiny bit further away, you know, nice sort of thin ones again that get nice and tapered on the end. So lovely sort of effects like this, and you've got all those lovely spikes. And let's maybe think about, see if I can add in maybe another one here potentially. That's looking cool. Awesome. So we've got our outline of our cactus all done. Now that's not the only space that we're going to add some of these sort of silhouette style accents to. We're going to go ahead and go to our brush though. We're going to change it to organic, and we're going to go and grab the twig brush. I've got the size set to 22%, and we're going to go up to this layer here that we created for this sort of mound of land down here. And then here we're just going to add in some little blades of grass. You could use the same brush as we did a second ago, but for this one I ended up changing it up, and this one should give us a bit more variety. You can also drop the brush size to say like a 12% if you want to get some finer lines in here, but we're just trying to sort of get rid of sort of the mound look to this a little bit more and create just a few blades of grass, a bit of an uneven edge to it as well. And you can send a few a little bit more upright, but over here maybe we keep the density to a little bit of a lesser degree, so maybe we just add in a few here around the base and then leave a gap, and then maybe just a few. So I'm still at that 12% at this point, and I'm just pointing those outwards just to, again, create some nice variety in there. And then maybe the odd little larger cluster that makes its way a little bit higher. And then I'm just going to rough this edge up a tiny bit, getting rid of that monoline sort of aesthetic to it. So just wiggle your pen along the edge between the blades of your grass just to try and again get rid of that perfect monoline aesthetic to it. As much as I love the monoline, sometimes you don't want that sort of perfect edge to it. And we've broken that down. That's looking cool. We've got some good variety on either side. Now we can start to work on the details of the actual cactus. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to tap on the cactus main body, and we're going to create a new layer. Now what you may want to go ahead and do is swipe from left to right and group them together and call it sort of main body if you wish. It's up to you depending on what you want to do, because I'm going to separate a lot of layers here, but you don't have to do that. So I'm going to tap on this layer and clipping mask it to that shape. I'm then going to go ahead and go to my brush, and I'm going to go to airbrushing and the soft brush. I'm going to go to my colors, and I'm going to grab this color here, the middle of the second column there. Brush size wants to be set to around about sort of 10%. I think that's a nice small size that we can sort of control. We want to leave the bottom left here nice and dark, so I'm going to sort of just go lightly over the top right area here and blend down until we end up with a dark corner and a little bit of a lighter brown in the top right. It'll be very tricky to see on camera, I imagine, but you'll be able to definitely see that on your canvas. You can also see a little bit of a gap here between the two different shades. Now, this is what I was referring to. You can do it on the same layer as you wish, or you can go ahead and create a new layer and clipping mask it like I'm going to. I'm going to go to my colors and grab the green at the bottom of the second column. And we're going to then blend in some green at the top here, over the top of that brown, creating a gradient between the green, the brown, and the dark tone here. So nice and green in the top right. We're then going to go ahead and add in a set of highlights that are going to sit on the very edge. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and tap on it. We're going to clipping mask it, and we're going to change blend mode from normal to add. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the same as the sun color. So this one here, the bottom of that fourth column from the right. Your brush wants to be a lot smaller now, probably around about that 5% range. And we're going to lightly, very, very lightly go around the top right edge of your cactus and then bring that highlight down this edge. So I'm trying to keep it right up against the edge. And then eventually, as you start to keep going, your lines will kind of switch. They'll go almost from a sort of a dark silhouette to maybe a little bit of a more brighter outline, a bit like here at the top. It's now brighter than the background, and that is not necessarily a problem. So we can just sort of blend that in. We're bringing that brightness around the edge here. Now I'm going to go ahead and do one coat of this like so, and I might just bring that right around the top a little bit on the left. I'm going to go ahead and swipe it to the left and then duplicate it just so I can see the difference, and of course that makes it really, really bright. Now on this additional one, I'm then going to go ahead and go to my eraser. Tap on the eraser and use the soft brush. And again, just set the brush size to about 8 or 9% and just sort of blend this out and just leaving the very top corner there a little bit brighter than this side edge. Just to add in a bit more variety, but to be honest, that top one there is a little bit too bright based on my pressure. So I'll just bring that down to about 50% and we'll move on and leave it as that is. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in some of the groove lines to the actual body. So we'll go to our layers, we'll create a new layer and it's going to be unclipped. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here, the top of the 4th column there. Our brush wants to change to calligraphy and the shale brush. And the size, it's going to fluctuate, but to be honest, if we set it to around about 8 or 9%, that should give you a good amount of pressure. And then you can press lighter to get these taper on the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top. We're just going to curve it outwards a little bit, create our first line, and it's going to run all the way down. Doesn't matter if it's not straight, and then let that just fade out towards the bottom. We'll blend it out in a moment anyway. And then from there, we want to create another one coming down here. And then we're going to create another one. But as you start to sort of go closer to the edge, we want the gap between the lines now to start to get a little bit closer together. So we're going to go down again. And they're gradually getting closer together. And as I make my way right towards the edge, these ones now should almost be touching. So you can see that kind of gap and how it changes. Now it's up to you. You can go ahead and duplicate it if you want to. If you want to just flip it on its head and just go the opposite way. Or you can go ahead then and start to draw in the next line down. So this one in the middle will have the widest gap, of course, because that side is facing us. And then again, you repeat the same concept. So you come down this edge and the gap should now start to somewhat think about getting a little bit smaller as we make our way down here and a little bit closer towards the edge. And it doesn't matter if you've got any kind of natural tremors in there. I think I got caught on my sketchboard a couple of times here, which to be honest actually looks fairly good because it gives you that nice natural look to it. So we've run all the way down and then you should have all of these brown lines running through your cactus. What we'll then go ahead and do is we will add in some spikes to it. Now don't forget, everything we're going to do on these layers now, we're going to repeat on the side arms as well. So we're going to repeat all of it as we go. We're going to set up this layer first. So go into our brushes and go into calligraphy and the script brush. I've got the brush size set to 4%. We're going to zoom in and we're going to add in some spikes on here too. Now the ones here in the middle, they're going to somewhat be facing you. So I think you can just kind of, you can crisscross a few, but you can't sort of push them out too far. So just kind of create sort of random crisscross lines. That's all you need to do. Nothing sort of too intense, nothing too sort of perfect. Just kind of crisscrossing these lines all the way down. And then add in like the odd occasional one that you think is applicable. So just try not to overthink this one as well. Just a few sort of crisscrossing lines for all the little spikes. And you should just be able to rough up that edge enough and give it enough of that kind of texture and aesthetic where it's got all the spikes running down. I'm just going to keep going. The odd one again that has like a line running a little bit astray is going to look great. And you don't have to sort of make sure it's left, right, left, right, left, right. You can then intertwine some additional lines in there that are a little less uniformed. And also you can flick them upwards at an angle, you can flick them down. It's totally up to you. I think, to be honest, just allowing your hand just to kind of naturally just be a bit random and almost like jittery with it, and its application will look great because then you can just randomly create some lines here. And as we make our way up, we're going to have to keep doing it along all the lines here. You don't have to do too many, as I said, you know, keep it kind of minimal if you want to. It's totally up to you. And of course, there's probably brushes that you could maybe use for something like this. If you've got one handy, you know, feel free to use it. I like to, at the minute anyway, just make sure that all the little details kind of like this, we don't try to use a brush necessarily that would just do it for us. You know, we want to learn to do minimal sort of things like this ourselves. And then that way we're advancing our skills and just triple checking that, you know, we've not lost it, and also building up muscle memory as well. I'm just going into this last line here on the left hand side anyway. I'm going to keep crisscrossing these all the way down. And some of these ones, especially on this left hand side, you might end up losing them. So don't kind of add too many in there, especially not something you're too precious over. You'll probably end up losing them a little bit. I'm just going to add some more here. And just keep going all the way up and down here. And again, some of them don't need to be really, really long. You can keep some of them nice and thin, like so. And just keeping on going. And again, as I mentioned, we will also do this in a moment on the side arms as well. So I'll just quickly make my way up and down here. Add in some on here. A couple more on there too. Little crisscross lines, Lovely stuff. And then we've added in all of that sort of nice sharp detail. You can then start to take a look and just see if there's any areas that you think you might want to just add some more into. The only thing to try and abide by is try not to overlap at the very top. So what I mean by that is don't go beyond the boundary of the cactus. We want to go ahead and maybe just grab our eraser and kind of just blend those out at the top. Likewise, if you go off the edges too much, try to sort of tailor that a tiny bit as well. Now what we'll go ahead and do is we'll go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and tap on this layer and we're going to add a mask to it. So we can just hide part of it, just in case again we want to reveal it. Making sure your color is set to black. You are on the mask here. What we want to do is we're going to kind of darken up this bottom left hand corner and kind of just blend out a few of these lines here on this left hand side. So we're creating a very dark corner here, kind of blending that around. You can go ahead and potentially even just darken up behind this arm as well, so taking away a few of those lines. And then maybe just a light coat or two, just really sort of very, very faint with your pressure, just running up here, just to take away a little bit of those lines on the cactus, adding hopefully a little bit more of a shadow element to that side. Then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start to add the color to this. So we'll go ahead and create a new layer. We'll tap on it and we'll clipping mask it to the lines. We'll go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and move to this green here, the middle of the fifth column. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to change it to airbrushing and the soft brush. And on this layer, we're going to go ahead and introduce some green onto the lines. So what we'll do is we'll just very lightly in the top right, start to build up that green and allow the green to kind of sit on the top here. You can bring that down a little bit, but don't go too far. We want to have a blend between the green, the brown, and then the masked area of the shadow down here. So you can just you can brighten up, should I say, up in this top right area. And just like we did with the outline there of the cactus, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. We're going to tap on it and change its blend mode to the option of add. We're going to go to our colors and we'll grab the sun color in the bottom of the fourth column from the right. Bring your brush size down to probably around about 5 or 6%. Brighten up on those lines and then bring that down a little bit. So trying to focus it maybe a little bit more towards this right side. Do not bring it over this left side at all, really. So just kind of focus it up here and along down some of those straights that you can see in your cactus there to reveal some of its details. And then you should end up with this really awesome effect where you can see all the little spikes. Again, it's totally optional, but you may want to go ahead then and swipe this layer to the left and duplicate it and just see what that looks like from a highlight point of view. I quite like that. I think it looks really good and it reveals a lot of the detail. Now, one thing we are going to do from a detail point of view as well is we're going to go ahead and go to the layer here that's got all of our line work on it. We'll swipe it to the left and we'll duplicate it. Now, we're going to go ahead and grab the bottom one out of the two, making sure you grab the bottom one and its layer. Go ahead and delete the mask, swiping it to the left and deleting it. Then tap on it, alpha lock it. Then go up to your colors, grab the color in the bottom left of the palette, go back to the layer, tap on it and fill it. And then what we need to do is we just need to go ahead and grab our cursor. We're going to zoom in just enough that you can see it. So I'm going to move it across to the left and watch how we just start to bring in this kind of shadow on the cactus. If you zoom out now, all of your sort of spines there are now really sticking out. So bring it across to the left. Now, what we also need to do is you'll notice it sticks out on the left. Once I've moved it across, I'm going to tap on it and clipping mask it to the actual cactus. So now it sits in that stack here to the main body. I'm going to tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. And I'm going to go up to my adjustments. I'm going to go to Gaussian blur and I'm going to blur it out, getting rid of some of those pristine details there. So I've gone up to around about 3 or 2% Gaussian blur. Tap on my adjustments when I'm done. And now you should have this fantastic level of detail to it in terms of depth as well. So we've done that. We just need to repeat it for the other areas, which is the two arms. And of course, they're just on one layer. So if you want to, by all means, tap on your body here, flatten it down. It's totally up to you. We had to separate them because we didn't want our brushwork getting sort of overlapped. So what we'll do is we'll go to our arms here for it. We'll go ahead and we'll create a new layer, swipe from left to right on both, and I'm going to rename that group, and I'm going to call it arms. I'm going to go to the empty layer above. I'm going to tap on it and clipping mask it. Now it's up to you if you want to go ahead and again go ahead and add in all the colors onto one layer. I'm going to in this particular example simply because it's only a small space. So I'm going to grab this color here, the middle of the second column. My brush wants to still be soft brush under airbrushing. Let's go to about 5 or 6% brush size, and we're going to just brighten up the top right area and the top right and the right side, should I say. Making sure it's nice and colorful, blending that out, leaving the darkness in here where it connects to the body. Here on the left side, we'll brown up the top, but we'll leave it here nice and dark at the bottom. We'll go to our colors. We'll grab the bottom color in that second column. We'll add in the green on the top again. Just a little bit on this side, but a bit more on this side. So again, bringing it down that right edge and around that top side. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in that bright edge again. So we're going to go back to our layers, create a new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it, change blend mode from normal to add, go to our colors, and we'll grab the sun color, the bottom of the fourth column from the right. Your brush wants to be set to around about 4%, and we'll just go ahead and make sure that the layer is clipped. So tap on it and clipping mask it if you haven't already. And then this right edge, about 3 or 4% brush size, we're just going to go around the right side, come down here, and you can keep it nice and soft to start with, and maybe the odd sort of brighter little bit on that top edge. Over here, I want to keep this really thin. You can see how right I am of the actual shape. I want to make sure that this side over here doesn't have quite as much highlight as the opposite side over there. I want to keep this one a little bit sort of more in the shadows, a little bit on the top edge. And then once you've added in one coat, you can again swipe it to the left and duplicate it and just see if you like the look of it with two. Again, I'm going to grab my eraser. I'm going to blend this left side out just to take it down a little bit, but leave the right side a little bit brighter. We're then going to go ahead and add in the line work that sits on top. So in this group, we'll create a new layer that's not clipped. We'll go to our colors and grab the color here, the top of the fourth column. Your brush wants to be set to the option again of calligraphy and the shale brush. Brush size is set to 9%. You may want to go a tiny bit smaller potentially in this area, so we can bring that down to around about sort of a 5 or 6%. And we can start adding in those lines again. So you kind of start at the top. I'm going to do the left side first. I'm going to bring that down, and whatever angle you come in down here is perfectly fine. Just kind of curve it round. Again, create another one just beside it, leaving a pretty even gap all the way down. And then the gap again starts to reduce the further you get towards the edge of the arm here. Coming down there, keeping it nice and thin in that area. Then I'll do the opposite side, making sure that the middle gap is probably the biggest gap. And then the sides over here can get a little bit closer. It may be a little bit tricky to see on camera. I'm struggling a little bit to see on my own screen, but same principles apply. Now, once you've done that side, let's make sure we do the opposite side as well. So we'll go down here, curving it in. I'm letting it get really, really thin on the end there, just so that that is where it just tapers off into the shadows. And then on this side over here, really, really thin. We'll create the largest middle gap here, bringing that down and around. I'll make that one a little bit closer. And then another one just in here. It's a very thin one. And then because of how it sort of contorts and twists, etc., they don't really make it into the body. We'll go back to our brush though. We'll go back to script because I think it's the best brush to do this with. And we'll make sure the brush size is 4%. And let's just again crisscross some lines in here. Now, these areas here are not quite as detailed as, of course, our main area at the sort of main body of the cactus. So I would try not to overthink this one either in terms of just adding in detail. Keep it a bit more minimal. It's a little bit of a smaller area as well. Just trying to run a few here and there, nothing too intense compared to the main body. Crisscross, crisscross, crisscross. I'm just leaving slightly larger gaps in between compared to our body. We'll run that up towards the top. A few on this side too. because of course in a minute when we add in the highlights onto these lines and the shadows, they'll be revealed, so you still need to do this particular step. Lovely stuff. Let's move across to the opposite side, and again, crisscross all of those little lines in here. Random angles will look fantastic, random lengths as well, but within sort of the same sort of boundaries. You know, you set like in your head what the longest is that you're happy to sort of draw in here, and then the shortest ones as well. So you don't have too many that just get really, really wild and really out of control. Running that up here. Keep on going. All the way up towards the top. Again, make sure in a moment that you take a look at your work and just triple check that you've not run outside the boundaries of the cactus actual body here, like the arms here. Just making sure that you've stayed within them. And then you've got your detailed lines in there ready to go. What we'll then go ahead and do is we'll start to add in the color to them as well. Create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it to the lines. Before we carry on though, let's go down to the lines, tap on it and add a mask. Making sure you are on the mask, your color is set to black and your brush is back to airbrushing and the soft brush. You can now start to sort of eliminate some of the lines. So here, I'm going to darken up under here on this left side, really take away some of those lines there, blend them into the corner. Here, I would imagine that this area is going to be nice and dark here, and I can just run up a bit of a shadow on the left edge and sort of just take away a little bit of the ones on the left, just the same way that we did the body. And then with that done, we can then go ahead and go back up to the empty layer that we just clipped. We'll go to our colors and we will go ahead and grab this color here, the middle of the 5th column. Brush wants to be the soft airbrush again at about 5 or 6%. And again, top right, just sort of blend in that green right up against that right edge, bringing it down. Now on this left side, I'm probably only going to add a bit of green in here and right up in the top corner only. Leave the brown at the bottom. We'll then go ahead and we'll go to our colors. I'm going to do it on the same layer. I'm just going to grab the color at the top of the 5th column. And I'll add in a slightly brighter bit of color up on there. A slightly brighter bit of color up here too. Lovely stuff. And then we'll go ahead and we'll add in a little bit of an edge highlight on them as well. And then we'll go to our layers. We'll go ahead and create a new layer. We'll tap on it and clipping mask it, and we'll change the blend mode from normal to add. We will grab our sun color again, the bottom of the 4th column from the right, and we'll just purposely pick a very light amount of sort of area to add in some brighter spots there to our lines. So just brightening up the right edge there, just revealing all those little sort of blades that we created a little bit up here on the top edge and bringing it down just a tiny bit, but more so on that top edge. Now, that is our cactus all done with. If you want to, you can actually go ahead and collapse the arms, merge them together if you want, save yourself some layers. But what we're going to go ahead and do is just underneath our cactus, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it underneath. It doesn't matter if it's in the group or not. It's perfectly fine on its own. We're going to go ahead and set the blend mode to add. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the red here in the middle of the 4th column. We're going to go to our brush. We are going to go back to the option of calligraphy and the script brush. And now we are going to go ahead and draw in some highlights that are on the opposite side of the cactus that we can't see. So what I mean is zoomed in right at the very top here. You see how these ones are really, really bright. I want to add in this very light glow here along this edge. So what you can do is just really lightly go along here, like drawing it in like so, just to really crisp up that edge, like here. Bring that down into here, and that's just where the light is just like really hitting that edge, and the very edge of it's nice and bright. And then the odd random little spike here and there that's just sticking out, it's on the opposite side of the cactus, so it's nice and bright and bathed in the sunlight. We'll go ahead and then repeat that over here too, so you can just wiggle your pen a little bit down this edge, just kind of giving it a bit of a golden outline. You'll see a little bit more down here, for example, where you're just brightening it up. And again, you can just chuck out some random spikes here and there. Again, in the areas where it's a little bit more contrasty, you'll see this a bit more. But in these areas, we just have to kind of battle the brightness almost. And then just in here, just the tiniest little bit along that edge there. Likewise over here, we'll go ahead and just add in the tiniest little outline. You can see it's literally a pixel or two. And then as it gets towards the top, we'll brighten that up a tiny bit more. A little bit maybe on the rear of it. And then again, a couple of blades just sticking out, or spikes, should I say, not blades. A couple of spikes just sticking out here and there. That's just catching a little bit of light. Likewise, you can come down this edge over here. And of course, this edge as well of the cactus, and add in a few spikes there. Then what we're also going to do is on the same layer with your grouse down here, just add in a few more blades here that are just catching some light from our sun on the opposite side. And again, you can wiggle your pen in here just to kind of brighten up the land till we're seeing just the back side of it. We're just seeing a few areas there of the blades and we're getting the silhouette. But on the opposite side, it's getting bathed in the sunlight. So we can just go ahead and wiggle our pen along that edge and then add in some really lovely bright blades of grass. And just a few, you don't have to sort of make them sort of too repetitive either. Zoom out and you should just get this beautiful silhouette kind of effect. Now this area of the ground down here actually needs a little bit more work. So what we'll do is we'll go up to that little sort of mound that we created. We'll go ahead and we will create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it to it. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab this color here in the top left of the palette. We'll go back to our brush and we're actually going to go ahead and use a pretty random brush for this. We're going to go into organic and use this sable brush here. I've got the size currently set to about 25% and I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of run it down here, and we are going to somewhat sort of lose a little bit of the color of the silhouette. So what I want to do is I just want to kind of blend out and kind of as you make your way around, notice how like the lines, you know, they should point down technically here and then continue in this fashion. See how they slowly start to point outwards, which gives you that kind of rounding effect. So here on the end, they're going to be pointing quite diagonally over here outwards, and then they start to slowly get a little bit more pointed down in those areas. And we kind of want to block in a good amount of color on here as well, just to kind of really take away a good amount of the sort of the light or the shadow, should I say. Let's come down this edge as well and just sort of bring in a little bit that just makes its way off towards the left hand side, giving you a little bit of a short shadowed spot in behind here on the mound. So you can make these nice and sort of brown on there, leaving this area here. You can bring this round just a tiny bit with a few very, very, very light strokes. So majority covered over there, a little bit on that top edge over there. We'll also go ahead and go down to the main shape of it and tap on it and add a mask to that too. We'll go to our brush stone, we'll change it to airbrushing in the soft brush. Again, your color wants to be set to black and make sure you are on the mask of that new layer that we created, or that mask of the layer we created. We're going to just blend out the edges down here. So just start to blend that out really, really lightly, just so it's very, very seamless how it just runs into the ground. It's a little bit like this. And let's just try and take away just the sharp edge back here. So just really, really lightly, just sort of taking away a little bit from the mound. And hopefully that just gets rid of, again, its sharpness. If you need to, though, change your color back to white and then draw it back in. You know, it's totally up to you where you think it's going to be necessary to do so. So once you've got that, let's go ahead and add in a shadow behind here as well. Definitely needs one. So we're going to go ahead and go down to where our floor texture is here. We'll go ahead and create a new layer. We'll go ahead and set the blend mode from it from normal to multiply. It might only make a minor difference. We'll go ahead and go to our colors and grab the bottom left color in the palette. Soft airbrush still. Look at where your sun is. If you were to draw a line straight through here, that's kind of the angle that we want to sort of abide by. That's the angle of the sun. Now we can exaggerate that a little bit by kind of pushing it off to the left-hand side a bit more. But we're going to go ahead and with long, even, soft strokes here, we're just going to create a lovely shadow. We're going to sort of darken up a little bit behind the mound a bit more, just to kind of show that it is raised up a little bit. So it is causing a little bit of a shadow. And we can just push that a little bit wider, just sort of spreading out the shadow a bit more. Let's go ahead and bring our brush size down to about 3% and just behind here, just kind of push that off a little bit off of that corner. If you go a little bit too high just behind your highlights there, just grab your eraser, soft airbrush again, and just get rid of it in behind. So just making sure on the opposite side, you don't add any shadow. The shadow should only be on this side. Go back to your brush, about 5 or 6%, and I'm just going to try and just feather in a bit of a very, very light shadow there. but creating that really long drag there. And then making sure we go to our actions, we turn off our drawing guide. And if we go ahead and we pinch with 2 fingers and we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this simple cactus design. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram when you're done. And as always, make sure to come and join my Discord community. It's completely free to join, and it's one of the best places that you can share your Procreate work, your traditional work, and it doesn't have to be a tutorial of mine. It can be any tutorial that you've created from any tutor. Again, links to everything will be linked in the description down below, along with a link to my Patreon, where you can go ahead and get access to a catalogue of over 100 Patreon exclusive tutorials. And the catalogue just continues to grow every single month because I create 3 new exclusive tutorials every single month for my Patreon supporters. You can have your name featured in videos, get sneak peeks of what's to come, early access, and much, much more. So hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.